Alright, so to get started here, how many of you guys have at least a little bit of an understanding on how the metric system works, generally? Okay, so most of you. This is because the metric system is used in the US. It's just used on a voluntary basis. It's not a nationwide standard of measurement. Officially, America uses the imperial system of measurement. This would be like inches, feet, yards, miles for length, and then ounces and pounds for weight. The problem with this system is that conversion between units is extremely inconsistent. They're based on random standards of measurement, and there's no pattern at all when you go from unit to unit. The metric, or SI system, on the other hand, is based entirely on the simple and consistent conversion of units. SI is the French abbreviation for International System, which is basically the most updated version of the metric system, the one that's used the most widely today. Even though officially we use the imperial system, many people are familiar with the metric system because it's just less complicated. We have metrics in the US on a voluntary basis. I'm guessing a lot of you guys have probably used metric measurements in maybe science classes in high school. So if you take a look at our Indian class survey results, only 35% of the class could tell how many yards were in a mile, compared to 85% of the class who knew how many meters are in a kilometer. That's a 50% difference. And it's attributed to just how much more simple the metric system is to our imperial system. As you can see by this map here, the United States is one of only 3 remaining nations globally to not be using the metric system. And we're the only English-speaking country to be using the imperial system. This is important because when you take into account global commerce, it's extremely complicated when people engaged in commerce have been taught different systems of measurement. This is sort of a satirical chart someone made up to make fun of America for not using the metric system, but if you look at this side, it shows how to someone else looking at us, it just kind of looks stubborn to continue to use the imperial system, and it doesn't make sense not to use the metric system. As you can see, our standards of measurement are really inconsistent as compared to kind of one constant conversion factor. There's 12 inches to a foot, 3 feet to a yard. 1760 was the answer to how many yards in a mile, and then you have 16 ounces to a pound. Where in the metric system, you have 1,000 millimeters to a meter, 1,000 meters to a kilometer, 1,000 kilograms to a gram, and 1,000 kilograms to a metric ton, which in itself is different to an imperial ton. So what need does this present us with? According to Colin Wrigley, we need to have a common language if we are to communicate. That will be evident to any students who have traveled to countries where they have not understood the language. Likewise, we need a common language of standard units of measurement for coherent dialogue to proceed in trade and science. Wrigley also states that an understanding of units of measurement is essential to all quantitative aspects of science and technology. Ideally, this system of units should be uniform, but the world still struggles with 2 major systems of weight and measures. And the reason we still have 2 major systems is basically our fault. So, where do we go from here? The obvious solution is that the United States needs to convert to SI. This conversion will be difficult at first, but will be better in the long run. According to Call and Daniels, the SI system is simple and easily convertible. This is not the case with the imperial system, where the foot was based on the length of Henry VIII's right foot, and the mile was the length it took for Roman legion soldiers to march 1,000 double steps. So the imperial system was based on just random units of length and weight, so it doesn't make sense to continue using that as a system for our country. According to Michael Chapman, metric proponents say that conversion is necessary and inevitable. Most of the world uses the metric system, and international trade involves metric-sized products. If American industry wants to stay competitive in the global marketplace, then US industry better get on the metric bandwagon. By going metric, the US government would open the door for new markets and help to create new jobs that the nation so drastically needs. Visualizing the use of the metric system is easy in the United States when you take into account how widely it's already being used. According to Chapman, metrics have been legal in America on a voluntary basis for 100 years, but except in metric-dependent fields like science and trade. widespread conversion has not occurred. We use metric in science and commerce because it really is necessary. But other than that, we still haven't converted on a nationwide scale. Success of SI is already visible in other nations. According to Judith Randall, since mid-century, all other English-speaking nations have made the switch to metric. For example, Australia and Canada, longtime adherents to the imperial system, are now comfortably in the metric camp, as is England itself, which is where the imperial system originated, even they converted to metric. In order to ensure progress is made, action needs to be taken on our part. By prioritizing training in the fundamentals of the metric system, metric conversion costs can be reduced. We can make this easy. Peyton Hinkle states that early in the conversion process, a general orientation should be provided for everyone to be sure that a firm's intent to convert has been well communicated and stimulates interest. Many methods were employed by British companies to make escape from metric impossible. Posters, newspapers, and other means were used. Different familiar objects were labeled with their metric dimensions, height of doors, height and length of beams, etc. The biggest thing that we can do is voice a desire for metric fundamentals to be taught and prioritized, and to begin educating people on SI. We have to start small before we can introduce the metric system on a nationwide scale, but eventually we will greatly improve the areas applicable to the metric system, like science and trade, and we can basically just fix everything. That's my speech. Thanks, guys.